So some of us have had a worse time than others over the last 9 months. Ingrid, you're in Melbourne. Have you been in lockdown? What's the experience been like? I think one of the great things about this summit is that we can see others have been in the same situation as us. We're kind of holding a mirror up to everybody. What's it been like for you? Have you been working from home or?
Yeah, it's been actually quite interesting. I think a lot of the sort of conversations I've been having with particularly people in the design industry is this idea of talking about a circuit breaker. And I know for my own personal sort of, I guess, design practice, it's been a really interesting exercise because I've now fully transitioned to a paperless office, which, things like that, I never thought that's something I would do. And I think it's this really interesting idea that's happened about being more agile and more flexible. So actually there's a lot of, I guess, I don't want to say positives, but a lot of benefits I've sort of managed to kind of pick up in the last 8 months. It's been tough, like it has been very tough. Work from home, trying to run a design firm and kind of coordinate a lot of people, a lot of projects, has been really challenging. But I think my staff or my firm that I'm with has been incredibly strong and very supportive in terms of making sure we're checking in all the time. And I think it's tough, but it's actually it sounds like a little bit toxic positivity, but it could have been so much worse. I'm actually really grateful that I've been in an industry that is infrastructure related, infrastructure based, so there is work and it is it's a valid industry in that sense, and I've been able to kind of as a company carry through that. So it's tough, but it's been okay, like in terms of actually getting on with it, essentially. And I think having people that work for you that care about what they do and are responsible for their own work and their deadlines is really useful as well. And just trusting people to do their jobs. I mean, that was probably, as a leader, that's probably the hardest thing, is just trusting people. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's, it was not great being in Melbourne, but obviously it's the right thing to do at the time. So yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Jackson, you're also in Melbourne, but you're out in the sunshine today. A bit of natural light there coming in. How's it been for you? Working from home?
Yeah, I have been. Yeah, I just found it, I thought I'd come outside because I think that's the new environment that we need to talk about here. In that, yeah, I think it's allowed us a bit more time to actually just sort of start thinking about what it's going to be post-situation, to do some research, to look at what's happening elsewhere around the world, to look at the countries that just came out of their summer and what they were doing and things like this. And then also looking around our current environment and seeing what's happening in the streets in Melbourne and things like this. So yeah, I think it's been an interesting time to sort of reflect, but also to provide a little bit more time to actually do some thinking and research as to, what are the opportunities when we come out of this. I think
some people have found it they've been more productive working from home than they have in sort of office environment.
Yeah, definitely. You save, commuting and, cooking lunch is like right there. You don't have to go out and do it, or you don't have to bring it with you. I think there's a lot of time saving there. And I suppose meetings as well, like the amount of time you spend commuting to meetings and things is being removed as well. So, all those things have, positives and negatives, is that we're not physically involved with people as much anymore, which is definitely a negative. But it also does, provide you time to do other things. So yeah, I think it's about utilizing that extra time, putting it into something that's going to benefit the industry down the track. And yeah, I think the external environment and what's happening there, and like the internal moving into external environment and where that's going to go in the next, couple of years, we're already seeing it here in Melbourne, is like hospitality is taking over parts of the street, moving into car parks, and this has happened in a matter of months. So people are building decks and just sort of taking over the street. So we're seeing this pedestrianisation of car space already. So what that looks like in another year or two, and what that means for like us as lighting designers and what we do with those spaces as well, I think it's a huge opportunity, and it's going to become very interesting in what we do with summertime within our streets in the future.
Excellent. And Rachel, you haven't been in lockdown, have you?
Basically, no, not really.
How did you get the, yeah.
So I've had quite a different experience in Canberra. We had a period of 3 months where we were working from home full time. But quite early, June, July, our office opened back up to a 30% capacity. And within a few weeks, we just increased. And you can see I'm actually in the office now. I'm in one of our boardrooms. But yeah, and we're now to 100% capacity. And honestly, in Canberra public spaces, people just flocked back to the streets and back to cafes and hospitality fit outs. So the world of Canberra has honestly not changed very much, which makes it quite interesting how different each region has really reacted and operated. So yeah, we'll really have to address what the locals are actually doing when it comes to our designs. The Canberra public realm lighting is quite limited as it is. So yeah, it's quite almost life as normal where I am.
It's that thing about returning to normal, but a lot of us don't want to go back to the normal that was. We want a better future. So let's look at business as usual. With the COVID, with the lockdowns, is there going to be, I mean, you're spending time always reconnecting communities to the public sphere, but will there need to be extra things done in the next 12 months and the next 3 months to kind of get people back into the swing of being out there in the world, or a new normal? Any initiatives that are being done, or?
What my first feeling is that we're going to have more of an appreciation for lighting to public realm spaces. I feel like we've always known exactly what we can do and what our abilities are and what we want to do. I feel like our roadblocks have always been not being able to actually follow through with these designs. So I do feel that governments and communities and councils will actually have that appreciation there that allows us to actually fulfill what we've always envisioned for these spaces.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at a lot of the, I don't know if anyone's read, but the Melbourne Road to Recovery plan, it talks a lot about it being a design-led recovery. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea that, you know, as you say, there's like always things that we know aspirationally. And I think maybe it's a point now where when we can say, well, yeah, this is, a compliance, whatever, but it's about doing it in a clever way, in a more aspirational way, in a more human way. So I think there's a really cool opportunity where hopefully with a bit of luck, we can move beyond, as you say, just like meeting a code, and then actually start talking more about like infrastructure and experience and flexibility and all these kind of things that, you know, we as people and professionals who care about design, in particular lighting design, have all these sort of core beliefs, I guess. And I think it's a really nice opportunity that we can maybe, whether it's a temporary structure or a more permanent kind of thing, but I think definitely people are going to be asking more of their public spaces, if that makes sense, I think, particularly everywhere, obviously, but particularly I think where you haven't had a huge access to public space like Melbourne. So I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think we could kind of use this as an opportunity to rethink and kind of help reposition a little bit our value in the public sphere, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100% agree. I think it's the opportunity that we're waiting for, to be honest. It's like giving us...
Absolutely.
Everyone's appreciating
the outside again. Yeah.
And we're pushing boundaries now because we can. And that local governments and councils and cities are saying, okay, well, we're going to give you space within the street. You can do what you want with it. Let us block it off and you can build little things there and stuff. So this is like a really unique opportunity. I think the elephant in the room is what happens with the lighting within those spaces and temporary spaces and outdoor spaces now. Because, I mean, in Melbourne, we still have a strong winter. So when it comes to winter, we're still going to want to sit outside. We're going to have to put heaters out there and all this other stuff as well, which means we have to run power to it and all these other things, which means they become more permanent objects. And it's like, well, there's a lot of discussions going on here. When you build a permanent object in the street, it interrupts drainage and does all this other stuff as well. So I think, yeah, right now these spaces are lit by the streetlights. So if we have local councils, which, you know, a lot of them are predominantly using 4,000K street luminaires, replacing their streets with this, it's like, well, no one really wants to sit under a 4,000K street light when they're in a fine dining experience. So we need to have that discussion right now and say, okay, if a council is looking at doing things like that, they need to consider a warmer color temperature or a tunable fitting, or at least something that they can dim down a couple of steps, because these environments are here to stay now. So we need to very quickly evolve in how we think about a street and what we're using in a street. Do we end up with more sort of, you know, like we do at Christmas, we do catenary things and special systems throughout the street in different spaces, you know. I think we're going to see more of that and more of it as a permanent thing within all of our spaces. And that's just one intervention. But yeah, it's a really exciting opportunity. This is our chance to do really interesting, creative, and create these outside environments that we've all dreamt about for so long, that people are actually going to invest in now.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting with the kind of idea of there's always been that contrast or the kind of conversation between physical distancing and social distancing, and like sort of the terminology you use. I've always said where possible, where I remember to, physical distancing, because I think it's more relevant. But I think, you know, when you think of somewhere like Melbourne, Canberra, where they've got festivals, programs and stuff like that, like, is it now going to be more of it, like, you know, obviously we've got the iconic Melbourne laneways, things like that, White Night, Vivid, all those kind of ideas, and sort of the idea of the lighting festivals being to a certain degree kind of token. And I think there's actually going to be more opportunity now, and kind of hopefully, you know, this idea of activating like key little points, and it's not just in the city, it's in, I live in Brunswick, so it's Brunswick, it's Preston, it's wherever. Like, I think this idea of kind of creating more local festivals or local exterior or nighttime kind of events or noodle markets, anything like that, that's kind of, you can't have a cover-all approach to something like this, if that makes sense, because obviously different regions have been affected differently. So I think it's really going to be about like local community groups, or I don't know, I just think it's kind of, we need to make sure that anything we do is really localized to those communities. It's reflective of those people, because I think, yeah, it's, you know, lighting installation is great and all that, but it needs to actually have a purpose beyond just looking at a building that's lit up with a pretty projection. Like, it needs to have more than that and more substance than that. So I think, you know, from a sort of programming festival perspective, it could be really interesting to kind of have, you know, a series of like local nighttime festivals and something like that. Like, you know, so it's kind of a bit more kind of, I guess, human resonance, if that makes sense, rather than, yeah, just expecting everyone to come into the city, because that's not actually going to really re-energize community, I don't think, because you need to be careful about how you do it, personally.
Yeah, the temporary situation's a hard one to solve. I mean, how do we make these things permanent? Or it's never, it's not cheap to install something temporarily, especially run power to it and stuff like that. So how we solve all of those issues is, hopefully in the world of architecture, we don't have to solve a lot of those. We can just come in and do the lighting.
Do you think that the councils are coming on board, being proactive in saying, you know, we need to do something a little bit more than just, you know, connect people with spaces, to sort of come up with some initiatives to ease people back into feeling comfortable out in the public space? Do you work with councils yourself, or is it?
Yeah, I think to a small scale, they definitely are. I think we would all wish they did more. But I think they're quite realizing, and one big theme that's really happened for everyone through COVID is losing that feeling of being safe and safety, and feeling safe in your community. And all of a sudden you don't feel safe in your local shopping centre, and you don't feel safe in your community yard. Whereas I think a responsibility of lighting a public realm is really bringing that safety net back to communities. And just as simply as lighting a dark alleyway that people won't have to walk through to get to a certain restaurant, making them feel safe in their environment. I think is going to be really important. I think that is something that councils are understanding about, that safety element of lighting. So yeah.
It's sometimes, it's quite interesting, the safety thing, because it's the perception of being safer rather than being safer. So lighting, we've had speakers in the past talk on this point. It's always fascinated me. It's just that perception that you get, I'm safer now, which makes you more at ease going to the shops or whatever, rather than changing the data.
Well, safety and just being comfortable. And, you know, if we really strip that back to real basics, that's just being able to see where you're going and being able to see whether there's someone approaching you, you know. So, yeah, and even colour temperatures, if you've got a warmer environment, you feel more comfortable and you feel more safe and you want to walk through, and you also want to be there rather than under a 4,000 Kelvin street light. So...
Fantastic. Look, I've got a question from the floor, which is great. And please use the Q&A button. But from Michael Walker has asked, and it relates to this, how will lighting create a more responsive and inclusive space in the public realm? We've touched on it a little bit already, but any specifics?
Spaces really disappear if they're not given attention. And if you have no lighting in your space, people will walk straight past it. They really won't know that it's there. So you don't have to be a complete wizard that's just going to have these lighting elements that no one's ever seen before. So people are suddenly going to want to be there. But if you really have a good design and create a soft ambient environment, people are just, they're going to be attracted to your space.
Yeah, and I think signage and kind of knowing, like having a point of reference and point of destination is really important. So it's something we kind of, you kind of want to create, if you've sort of got a street full of people, this is from a commercial perspective, but outside dining, how do you help kind of make those spaces feel defined? So it's the idea of like lighting the perimeter, so if it's, you know, lighting columns, things like that. So I think kind of you need to give enclosure and context to like a dining precinct, for example, on a street. You can't just have it spilling out onto the road. It needs to kind of still have that sort of recognizable reference, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. And I think how many times we walk past a shop or past a restaurant and be like, oh, shit's back there. Like, you know, this idea of kind of, you need to always be kind of orientating yourself. So I think taking some of those kind of good internal design practices, or to, you know, lighting a back wall, lighting a part of banquet, wall lights, column lights, anything like that, and applying those sort of more hospitality-based, I guess, design principles to the exterior space is kind of an interesting idea as well, to kind of make a continuity between inside and out. And I know we were having kind of a chat yesterday about it's got to be more than just festoon lights. Like it needs to probably be something more intentional than that. So I think if we all acknowledge that this is something that is going to be here and we're going to change the way we do things, we need to make sure that we're creating a suite of treatments which makes it feel like a good space and not under a street light. So yeah, being smart about what we do. Yeah.
The responsive one's really interesting. It's like we've talked about control a lot for many years, and it's still not really prevalent as much as it should be in the public realm, probably because of cost and these things. But I suppose how it responds to these different scenarios throughout the year becomes really important now. If we are taking over new space that is lit with street lamps or something, then we need the ability to sort of control these, and maybe they have a 3-stage dimming and they go from 75 to 50 to 25% if the temporary installation goes over some restaurants and things. So we just need to start thinking about basic sort of control factors within luminaires that are within our public realm that can be adaptable to suit different scenarios. So it's not just on always or a single color temperature, because as we show now, we're gonna have so many different scenarios down the track that we don't know. So we need some sort of adaptability and built into the fittings that we're installing.
Okay, look, I'm going to come in with a totally different, because I do want to cover this. I know that all three of you are involved in sort of the career of lighting. You're through Women in Lighting, Rachel, and Jackson involved with the Association of Lighting Designers, and Ingrid within your own company there, kind of helping people on the career path. Can you each sort of maybe give me some input? I mean, about young people coming in, do they see it as a career choice? What more could be done perhaps to... One thing I have noticed, we have more females on this in this summit than most of the kind of conventions and conferences I do, so which is a good trend.
Nice.
Who wants to go in first?
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah,
Rachel.
It's an interesting one because a lot of colleagues that I meet through lighting and through Women in Lighting have all started somewhere else. I've never actually really met someone that's just left university, left high school, and gone straight to lighting. We've all segued from another design discipline. So yeah, it's quite an interesting question of how we can do that better, and maybe we do need to be attending more schools and really highlighting the discipline for what it is, because it's such an incredible and rewarding career opportunity. So I always find that quite interesting. Someone's always come from somewhere else in lighting. It's never started at lighting. So.
Or I mean, it's one of those things that in many aspects you can teach skills and you can teach a vocabulary, but you can't teach design passion, if that makes sense. And I think, I think of my own, I mean, I studied graphic design, never worked as one, always been a lighting designer, but it's about kind of acknowledging, tapping into what people's inherent interest is. And I think kind of, it's a cool discipline. But I think it's such, people understand it. They understand it's something which, as a discipline, like when you say, oh, I'm a lighting designer, they go, oh, do you design chandeliers? You're like, yeah, and other stuff. But I think it's really interesting that people understand it's really important. And I think as a profession, we've been progressively kind of, I guess, building up our importance. And I think when you're seeing sort of looking at hospital lighting, that was a really interesting present on the hospital lighting. And a lot of the things that were being spoken about were things that we do in a hospitality setting. And I think there's a really interesting idea that kind of, it's not about engineers and us, but it's about actually just a whole space reading well, if that makes sense. And I think kind of there's an awareness that we can tap into in terms of people inherently know if a space doesn't feel good or feels great. So I think there's kind of, I don't know how to kind of, otherwise run about, but I think, we've got professional bodies, and I think, credit to all the professional bodies like Women in Lighting and ILD, throughout this whole time, like, been pretty good holding the community together. And I think that's been really interesting that, in a situation like this, people would tend to just drift away. But I think people crave like-minded individuals. So I think maybe going forward in the next few months, few years, whatever, if there's a stronger sense of community, I think that would be amazing. Because I think people do want to actually speak to other people.
Yeah, and even through events like this, just having that voice and just talking about what we do because we love it and we're passionate about it, and just making sure that we're out there.
Yeah. But Rachel, give us the 30-second pitch for Women in Lighting.
Oh, there's not really a specific pitch. No, yeah, look, not a specific pitch.
You just are.
Yeah, you just yourself, talk about what you love and why you love it, and good things attract good people.
Indeed. Okay, Jackson, ALD, your involvement there, what's...
Yeah, if we go back to that point, I think it's been a really challenging year for people that are either early into their career in lighting design or as a student. So I think it's really important for people like Ingrid and Rachel, like that have other people, younger people working for them, that mentoring them through this process and keeping them entertained is really important. Because I remember when I was working for someone, just going into that office every day and being around senior people, that was something that kept me engaged in learning. And I imagine being remote and taken away from that for a whole year as a junior would be really difficult. So I think that mentoring process is really important. And from a student level, like trying to get a job right now, if you were coming into the industry, would also be really difficult. So I was just speaking to someone earlier today over in London, and they've just had lots and lots of students that have graduated contacting them. It's just like endless because there's so many people looking for work. So I think it's the time that we just need to support everyone, and anyone that reaches out, actually make the time for them and actually keep them involved, or pass them to someone that you know of. So I think that that community needs to stay strong. With regards to the ILD, they've been running their conferences online. They did the Americas one and the Europe one just last week. And although they couldn't, bring students to the conference like they normally do when they sponsor them, they still had sponsorships for them to actually attend them virtually, which I think is a good thing. But yeah, it's challenging time for this, but I think if you've been in the industry for longer than 5 years, you just need to dedicate some time to people that are younger than you, and actually try and keep them involved or send them information and things like this as well. Keep them inspired about staying in the industry together.
Cool. I have a bit of a follow-up from our first question on responsive and inclusive space. Inclusive in terms of helping a diverse range of people, say people with disabilities, elderly people. How does lighting, or what can we do to help those people as well in the public realm? So initiatives that get done there.
Well, I think that really points towards what Jackson was saying earlier about having those different control functionalities for all your different applications and your different times of days and your scenes. I had something else I was going to add to this, but I forgot it at this moment.
I mean, it's interesting looking at all the temporary structures that have gone around Melbourne in the last month, like all these decks. Not too many of them are like accessible. They sort of have stairs because they're all at different levels and they're trying to match the street. So they're very sort of early phase. So, I mean, I think this is all going to get ironed out in the process eventually. That way, these will all need to become obviously accessible to everyone. It's just that they were constructed so quickly that a lot of them aren't. But yeah, I mean, it's
sorry, Jackson.
Right. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, hopefully there's more, I mean, I know there's a spontaneous arrival of these deckings all around Melbourne, but hopefully as part of this kind of recovery process, there are more, I guess, formal constructions that are sort of become, I don't want to say designed, but designed and has all the that kind of consideration. Because I think it's a really valid point. And I think, this pandemic has been a great equalizer in terms of we've all gone through it. It doesn't matter who we are, where we're from. And I think to recover and to give everybody the kind of, I guess, best outcome at the end, or the best kind of way out of this, we do need to be inclusive. We do need to be equal opportunity, and acknowledging that it's actually affected people very differently as well. So I think, if there's some kind of more formal design process that makes sure that it is an inclusive space, it's really important.
Fantastic. Great question from the floor on that. Look, we only got about four or 5 minutes left, and I always like to give my attendees some homework. I'd like to find what floats your boat in terms of lighting in the public realm. Have you seen something that they can go and look up, either in Australia, or who does public realm lighting well? Is there something that you go, oh, must go and have a look at this project done here, or you should see what they do in Iceland? Or I know it's a curly question to finish.
Honestly, everyone should just visit Japan, to be honest. Japanese lighting is incredible. Just walk through the cities and every square, it's everywhere. What the Japanese designers do are incredible. But even Europe, like Europe's got such a history that we just don't have in Australia. They've been doing this for a long, long time. So there is a lot we can learn from a lot of what the European countries are doing.
Yeah, just anything lit, any public space that's lit indirectly would be my, just something which, you know, it does not, we live in a world that has physical form, and we have an opportunity to create beautiful, radiant architecture. And we don't need to go through and, you know, pepper the ceilings with surface matter downlights. You know, we can be smart and clever about how we light our spaces. So, yeah, look for indirect lighting in the public realm and be awed by it.
What are you awed by, Jackson?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I agree with both the other answers there as well. Like, I think in Australia, it's when you get people that come over here that are lighting designers from Europe, they often look at what we do in the urban environment. They're like, so how are you lighting your footpath? And we're sort of like, well, with the street fitting. And they're like, so you don't have a luminaire that just lights the footpath? And we're like, no, we sort of just light everything with one. So we're still at a predominantly here, like there's very few streets in Melbourne or around Australia that have a two-part lighting system, which would be something for pedestrians and something for the road. So, I mean, that's the first thing, is we need to get past this one part system. So yeah, I mean, looking into Europe for things like that as well. Obviously Japan, streets like Kyoto and stuff like that, where they have all these ambient light fittings, it's just such a warm environment. But I don't know, I spent a bit of time recently looking at summer pedestrian streets around the world. There's lots of so Stockholm has been doing it since 2014. They'll roll out whole street fit outs for just for summer. And it's like, well, how do you light these environments? And these are more permanent things. So they'll actually do like the planters that are actually road barges and things as well. So they've sort of integrated all of that. So I think Mexico City has done it. Paris is currently doing it as well. New York's doing it. So it's interesting to look at all these other cities and what they're doing with sort of 6-month sort of installations within streets and how they light those. I think that it's going to be a really interesting space in the future.
Fantastic. Well, as we we'll be in the position, hopefully, that other countries around the world will be looking at Australia and saying, look what they're doing, you know, as they get to the point where we are, because we're in a very special spot. I should have asked Ian Dryden earlier on what was his thoughts on the temporary, all the structures going up, which is hiding his illuminations around the city. But thanks, guys. We'll probably wrap it at that point. It's fantastic for you to share some of your insights and answer some of those questions from the floor. And I hope all our audience will help me in thanking Ingrid Baldwin, Jackson Stigwood, and Rachel Thompson. Thanks very much, guys, for your time today. We'll be heading...